Hey there. Just wanted to give you a little bit of an update because there was some concern about, anyway, a lot of things. A lot of has happened over the last couple days, obviously. And I just thought I would take the time to just kind of break it down, not take too much time, but just give you a little bit more detail than what is being said or what is written, although I have written about it extensively, and you can go to several different places, including my Facebook page or the Bundy Ranch Facebook page, and read about it. So, Idaho Legislators had a special extraordinary session that was called by the governor. This actually, in my view, was kind of appalling because by law, he was supposed to call the legislatures together within 90 days. He is only supposed to allow or have executive emergency powers for 30 days and then another 30 days. And here we are now, 6 months, going on 7 months, and we're still under emergency order. He made these orders when we had one death in Idaho that was basically declared as COVID. Governor Little's received billions of dollars from federal funding, and I believe that it's purely motivated to basically give Governor Little and his staff, the bureaucrats, an extreme amount of power to make decisions that normally they would not have the ability to make, and also for them to be funded in order to implement those decisions. And there's terrible things such as changing the laws that require certain things to happen before they can take children into the state custody. Anyway, I could go into detail with that, but this session was called by the governor, and because he was wanting to basically cover himself and his bureaucratic cronies in any liability that they might have for their decisions that they made upon the people of Idaho. Give you an idea that, hundreds and thousands of businesses have been shut down. We've been forcefully, under the threat of force for going to church. We've been, restricted from travel, and the list goes on. And they continue to ramp this up rather than de-escalate. We're now under more force and more threat than we were even a few months ago, and it appears that they're not going to end. So anyhow, we've, as a people, felt like that it was very important to show our presence at the legislative session, and that was simply all we were going to do. So hundreds of people showed up there, and then we get told that the House floor is closed, that the people can't go in it. I guess they were allowing 26 people in, and for the rest of the people, and it was for COVID reasons. Well, we were pretty upset about this, and people insisted on coming in, and you've seen the videos of that. And I don't need to go into detail, but anyway, ultimately the people pushed their way in. But there was one point that I wanted to make as a reference to me. The House Speaker of the House, he ultimately came up and backed Idaho State Police off and said, "Hey, let them in. Stop restricting them from coming in." But he then kind of announced to everybody that it would be normal decorum, and also that once the gallery is full, like normal, that people have to go to the overflow. And he wanted me to somehow commit that everybody would follow those rules, and I made it clear, and some others made it clear that that we don't just have one leader. We're all here as a people. We're not under some hierarchy where I'm at the top of it. But I agreed to those rules, and others did as well, or those to that agreement, that it would be normal decorum, normal rules. So the gallery came in, so that everybody came into the gallery. They filled it up, and everybody had a seat, and I, kind of didn't sit on purpose. I wanted to kind of just make sure that everybody got in and we're good and there was no problem at the door anymore. And then when I got into the room, I saw that the gallery was full. And so I felt like I gave my word to the Speaker of the House that if the gallery was full, I would go to the overflow. And so that's what I did. I left the gallery and I went all the way down to the bottom floor of the Capitol building, clear on the other side of the Capitol. It's about as far away from the House floor as you can get. I went to the Lincoln Memorial Auditorium, and I watched the session opening from there. And I just want to iterate that there's been a tremendous amount of lies, which I don't really care about, but I just want you to know that it wasn't, never once did I speak out or get, or break decorum or break my word. I gave my word to the Speaker of the House face to face. He said, would you follow those? And I nodded my head and I said, yes. It was pretty loud. And so I kept my word. And I left the gallery, as many others did too. And so that was the first day. And then, we felt like things went pretty good. We went then into the committee meeting where Cheney and others were, conducting this committee hearing over the immunity bills, I should say. And the one thing I also want to point out is the legislatures are not used to people being there. Usually these rooms are empty. So it is very awkward for them to have people make noise and respond. On the other hand, the people, you can say anything you want, honey. On the other side, the people are not used to being there, right? They don't really know the rules. They don't know the decorum. They might actually disagree with them. They want to be more involved. Well, anyhow, there was a natural process that the legislatures and the Chairman Cheney was going through to try to kind of get things established where the legislatures were used to the people being there and the people were used to being and following the decorum. And that pretty much by the end of the committee meeting on Monday, it was pretty much established. You've got where they weren't applauding after each testimony anymore. They were pretty much following, for the most part, the decorum. And I thought it was progressing really well and people were responding and the legislatures were doing their thing, whether you agree with the bills and all of that and how it was going on, which I don't, but either way, the process was happening fairly well. And I will note that on Monday, there was citizen journalists that were in the press box, just like they had a right to do, and nothing was said. It went just perfectly okay. And then they went at ease. The committee meeting ended for that day, but there were several other testimonies. So then the next day, now Tuesday, we come along and we go back into the same room, and they begin the committee meeting over again. But before that, I walk down and I say this in my letter explaining, but when I walk down the hallway, because it's on the bottom floor on the garden level, and you could see way down the hallway, I could see, I don't want to exaggerate, but 15 to 20 Idaho State Police. I mean, there was a tremendous amount. I was really alarmed and shocked by how many. The meeting hadn't started. In fact, the meeting I don't think started for another, maybe 30 to 40 minutes, maybe even up to an hour, because we sat there for quite a while. But I noticed that, I went in and I sat on the back row because I didn't want to. I had already given my testimony and I didn't want to make a big deal out of anything, so I sat on the back row. And then I noticed that almost all of the ISP officers left, Idaho State Police officers left. And they just disappeared. I don't know where they went. They went into some other room, but they weren't there. There was only 8 officers, and they were kind of scattered around, so it didn't feel like a whole lot of presence, right? And before the meeting, I also overheard Brian Bowmaster, which I didn't know who he was at the time, and Misty in the back of the room talking to a man who I didn't know. I found out later that he was a sergeant at arms for the Capitol Building, and they were discussing something about them not being able to be at the press table. And Misty was saying how she had credentials, and Brian was saying how he was a documentary filmmaker, and so that's basically what was going on. And I could tell there was like a kind of a struggle there, and but that was about it. And then the committee meeting began, and I didn't really pay attention to it until I saw the sergeant at arms go up and whisper something in Cheney's ear, and he literally walks up and whispers something to him, and then Cheney stopped, and he said basically to the effect that the pointing to Misty and Brian, that you can't be there, like you can't be at the press box, you don't have your credentials, or you don't something. And so so Misty was like, well, I am press, and she shows her badge, and and she tries to assert, and immediately that's what was alarming to me, was immediately here comes all these ISP officers, and it was all of them, all the 15 to 20, and they just flowed in the room, just filled the room, and immediately went down to where Misty and Brian were, and surrounded them and began to basically drag them off, and ultimately arrested Brian. Well, and then the people were upset. It was like they were trying to excite the people, to incite the people, is what it seemed to be. And the people were upset. They were, look, what is this? Why are you pulling them out of there? Why, they were there yesterday. What's the big deal? Why can you not just leave them alone? Right? And so now there's like this confrontation, and people are seeing how many there are and how abusive they're being to both Misty and Brian, and they're upset. They're extremely upset, and rightfully so, because I'll tell you right now, that was absolutely 100% provoked. It was provoked. I don't know, exactly who was the actual one, pushing the buttons. I know the sergeant at arms was involved. I know that the Chairman Cheney was involved. But basically what it seemed very clear to me, that was they were looking for a way to reassert their authority from Monday. Monday, basically, we went in there, the people went in there, they had a right to go into the House chamber, they pushed their way into the House chamber, and ultimately the Idaho State Police had to yield. Well, now they found this issue, which they're constitutionally wrong once again, about the press. The people are the press. The right of the press, the freedom of the press, belongs to the people. It's in the first Bill of Rights, the First Amendment. The Bill of Rights are not for ISP. They are for, and they're not for the legislatures. They're not for the government. They are for the people. And so clearly, once again, ISP is wrong, but it appeared to me, and I think very evidential, that they saw this issue as something that would allow them to reassert their authority and to incite the people, and then they could push their way, because now they have all these officers that are there. They've got hundreds of officers that are there, and they've got I don't know 100 or so cars outside, right? And so they took this opportunity to basically reassert their authority over the people. And one thing I will note, and I keep going back, when we were at the door on Monday, and they were saying that they're not going to let us in, one of the things that one of the officer kept saying, when we were saying, this is our house, this is our house, he kept saying, this is our house, this is our house. And I mean, I want you to think about that. And over again through this experience, which I've been arrested twice now, right? They have basically said that you're in our territory. This is our territory, and you're in our territory. You're stepping in our territory. Well, I want you to think about the implications of that. You know, when it comes to a Republican form of government, when it comes to the people and a government of the people, by the people, for the people. I want you to really think about what they're saying.
Pay for.
Yeah, that our tax dollars pay for, that we work hard, but it's our republic. That's where we do our business, right? That's where our representatives are supposed to go and conduct business to represent us and to basically, you know, take care of the matters of the republic. So now, here we're back in the Lincoln Auditorium. They have basically said that people cannot be the press, that the First Amendment doesn't apply to the people. It only applies to those who they give permission to be there. And they have now deliberately incited the people, and they have brought in, 20 officers and basically created a huge ruckus. I mean, a huge ruckus. People were only there to participate in the committee meeting. That was it. No one was. I mean, you look at the video. It's men, women, and children. There's families there. I mean, there was no one there to try to. But when they see injustice like what the Idaho State Police did, then they're not going to just keep their mouths quiet. So they expressed that, and then ultimately they drug the reporters off, and I just felt like it was important to go kind of establish that what was happening here that was wrong. So I went and sat in the press box just like Misty and Brian were. And I thought maybe they would try to come remove me and take me then, but they didn't. They just kind of completely ignored me, and they didn't want really anything to do with that. And they kept a presence in the room. And then Cheney, which I think was also a desire, without doubt, that they wanted basically an excuse to have the meeting, the committee chair meeting, outside the public's view. So therefore, they moved the meeting into behind closed doors. And they did that basically, so that, again, the public is not being able to participate and scrutinize what they're doing. And so definitely a motive there. And then eventually the ISP presence left, and everything settled down. And I just stayed in the press box, kind of making a point. And I knew that sooner or later, which actually happened a lot sooner than I thought, because closing was like around 7 o'clock or so. Well, this right around 5, so it happened a lot sooner. But I knew what would happen is they were going to come in with a show of force, and they were going to probably arrest me or remove me from the property, which was fine. That was fine. I was willing. I thought that they would probably just remove me from the property. That's what happens in trespassing mostly, right? You move, and that's fine. I just go home. But what I wanted to show the people, and what I knew was going to happen, was the show of force. And I tell you what, I mean, you've got to see the videos and the pictures if you haven't. The entire Capitol building was surrounded by cop cars. I don't want to say hundreds, but well over 100 cop cars from ISP and Boise Police Department. The entire, it's amazing to see how many cop cars were there, and then hundreds of officers. And then when they came in the room, and it was like they were trying to intimidate me, but I'm not intimidated by that stuff anymore at all. Not one single bit. Not even a little bit am I intimidated by it. And the head of the Idaho State Police, what's his name again?
Blake Higley.
Yeah, Blaine Higley. Blake Higley. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I don't remember your name, Blake. Now I do. But anyhow,
I will never forget it.
Yeah. So Blake Higley, he comes in, and the officers like they were. I mean, it was amazing. They literally marched in in file order, and they surrounded the entire perimeter of the room and and down the middle hallway, the middle aisle, and Mr. Higley then says something about like anybody who's in here will be by he says by order of the Speaker of the House, he said you're to vacate the room immediately or you'll be arrested. And so most people left and I just sat there and he basically gave people a short time period. And then I asked him, well, what are you going to arrest us for? He goes, trespassing. So then we sat there, and then ultimately they kind of swarmed me, and I'm just sitting there, took a drink of water, just sitting there. I don't know what they're going to do to me or whatever. But they surrounded me, and there was a couple ISP officers that were older, and they obviously had some authority. And to be honest with you, at that time, they actually treated me fairly well, if you want to call getting arrested for nothing, treated well, right? But I mean, they didn't abuse me, they didn't hurt me. They did put me in handcuffs, and I don't, just so you know, like, when someone is trying to tyrannize me, I am not going to help them. When they're trying to oppress me or take my liberties, I am not going to help them. Now, obviously, in the case, there's such inequality between the people and the officers that if you use anything to resist, any muscle to resist, then they'll charge you with a whole bunch of other charges. And so I don't resist or help. There's not a muscle that I use to resist or a muscle that I use to help. And so they had to pack me around and put me in a chair and drag me and take me to the car. When I got thrown in the car, it was awesome because Dave Miller was on the radio and he was talking about how he supported us, and he was talking about really what was going on at the Capitol Building, and when the officers got in, he turned off the radio real quick. So, but he was probably listening to him before, and he might be a conservative,
Yeah.
But anyhow, so they hauled me off to jail. I went to the courthouse first, and I don't talk to them, and I don't help them. So they had to drag me into the holding cell, and I wouldn't respond to them. So then they're like, well, he can't stay here for the night. So they drug me to the county jail, and they booked me in there. And again, I don't help them, but I don't resist them. So they had to basically fingerprint me by picking up my hand and doing all of that. And then they throw me in a holding cell. And I thought I was going to be there until my arraignment, because I wanted to get in front of a judge. I wanted to get in front of a judge, and this is what I wanted to say to the judge. Judge, your duty, one of your primary duties, is to check and balance an overreaching executive branch, right? And I'm asking you to do that today. Dismiss these charges and let me go home and give a statement that you will not allow the executive branch of government to start just tyrannizing and finding excuses to arrest and dragging people out of the Capitol building for participating in the process in which we paid for that building to be built and to go through these processes. Well, anyhow, I know out of complete good intent, someone bailed me out, and I didn't really want to be bailed out because I wanted to go in front of the judge. But I know it was absolutely out of the best intentions, and I'm grateful for that. And so I didn't have my phone or anything, so I put on my jacket, my hat, and I walked down to the Albertsons, about a mile and a half away. Found somebody with a cell phone, and called my wife, and she come and got me. And then I went home. And the whole time I was kind of pondering, well, what would God want to do, and what would be the right thing to do? And Lisa said, look, she's always, God works in mysterious ways, and she's always like, maybe this happened because God wanted something else to happen, right? So she's always expressing those things, which is a wonderful thing and so true. And so I kind of got thinking, well, maybe God wants me to go back to the Capitol building because I got out, right? And I also understand that, you use it or lose it. So, and to be honest with you, I didn't know there was like an order that I could go there for a year, right? By the governor. right, and the Speaker of the House, who I tried to be respectful to by going to the overflow room, but obviously he's fallen for the propaganda that I'm inciting all of this, right? So anyhow, that's all right. We forgive you too. Anyway, so I get up and I cook breakfast like I normally do. I cook breakfast. That's the only meal I cook. Lisa does the rest. Fed family and give them all a hug. And I told my little girl, who has been very concerned, you know, and was traumatized by the 2 years that I was gone. She still prays every day and thanks Heavenly Father for bringing her daddy home. Anyway, I gave her a hug and I told her, sweetheart, I might not come home for a couple days, but I will be okay. Just be okay. I'll be okay. Don't worry about it. Okay. I gave her a hug and then I left, and it was amazing because when we get there, right at the same time, some great, wonderful friends that have been so supportive and were walking the sidewalk right there. So we just kind of met with them. And then we go into the Capitol building, and basically most of the House stuff was already over, so now the Senate was started. So we went into the Senate, on the Senate floor, you know, I went in there and I sat down and I had my hat on, and which I normally do take my hat off, but I didn't take it off for some reason. And an ISP officer came up and said, hey, would you take your hat off? I said, absolutely, of course. And I took my hat off. I held up my hand because, you know, out of respect for the decorum and maybe decorum, but it was actually more just, you know, out of respect, one, to have your hat off in that room, respect for what the process that was going on, and I'm glad that he did ask me to take my hat off. And I did say, of course, took my hat off, and they opened the session. And then I noticed about midway through the, you know, beginning of the session that the ISP sergeant, what was his name again?
Blake.
Oh, Blake.
Yes. Higley.
Higley, okay. Sorry, Blake, I just keep forgetting your name. So Blake Higley, but he was walking back and forth, and he's looking through the glass, and he's looking at me, and he's just like, I could tell he's, you know, getting ready to ramp up some more force, but he doesn't have enough people there yet. And so he goes and he leaves, and I see him on his radio, back and forth, and I'm just listening to the senators back and forth, do roll call and different things. And then the senators went at ease, right? And shortly after, a group of ISP officers come up, surrounded me, and one other guy, he had to be a bureaucrat for sure. He looked exactly like a bureaucrat, even his partly balding head. But so I'm being told that from the Department of Administration, right? And they had this really fancy letter, and on it had the state seal, and it was even in color. And he tried to hand it to me and said basically that you've been trespassing, you're not supposed to be on the premise for a year. And I wouldn't take the paper. I'm not going to consent in any way or participate in any way. And his name was Keith Reynolds. And so, but I could see the ISP officers forming, and more of them in the hallway, and then everybody starts to get their cell phone out because of what's happening, and then they basically say I need to leave the premise, or that I will be arrested again for trespassing. And I had a little bit of a dialogue, basically said, you know, I felt like it was my right to participate in this process, and so ultimately, which they just handcuffed me. And I do want to say they were a lot more violent this time, actually quite a bit more violent. And one of the things that they did is they handcuffed me backwards. And the reason why that is significant is because it's much more painful. And then they tightened the handcuffs down. And you can see in the video, it's very clear. They tighten them down all the way. He grabs them and tightens them down. So now they got my hand in an upward, awkward position from the other one, and then they tightened it all the way down. And then they were very rough with me, which I expected. You know, I'm not trying to cry and be a baby about it. I kind of expected, but it just shows what a little bit who they are, and a little bit like what they're wanting to do. They're really wanting to, again, assert their authority. Now I do want to point out before I go into the other details, like, and even in the letter that Mr. Randall's tried to give to me, which I read later, or part of it later, it says there that basically I was a danger to to the process. I think is what they said to the processing. And I would like to challenge to show me anywhere through any of the time I was at the Capitol Building where I was a danger to anybody. And you might go, well, what about on Monday when we pushed our way into the House floor? And I would, one is I was never a danger to anybody, right? Did I assist in getting the door open and going in? Absolutely, I did. Did I encourage that to happen? No more than anybody else, but I was there as one of the people as well. Did I want it to happen? Absolutely. But also, was it the right thing to happen? Yes, the right thing was absolutely that the people go in there. They have a right to participate by law in every other right to go in there. And the ISP has no right whatsoever to stop it. And that's what just keeps coming up again. It comes down to what is right? And whose house is it? Does it belong to ISP and the bureaucrats? Or does it belong to the people? Okay? So anyhow, back to that letter, it basically is pointing out very clearly that they are looking at me as basically a figure that if they can remove, then they can more freely do whatever they want to do throughout the session. Then they can, that whether it's accurate or not, that to me is very clear that they're saying if we remove Ammon Bundy, then a lot of this other stuff will go away, which I don't necessarily think is true or accurate, because people were acting on their own. They were acting with their own choice. They were acting because they wanted to be there, because they wanted to participate, and because they were dissatisfied with their legislature's actions, and also appalled by the Idaho State Police. All right, so I'm getting kind of long, but now I'm just getting to the juicy part. Because they literally dragged me out. They've got me handcuffed, and just so you know, till today, I've still got marks, but that's not the real. That's not real. The real. Then my hands have mostly gone down, but still to this day, on the side of my hand right now, I have almost no feeling. Okay, and I've had this before, and usually it comes back, but sometimes it'll take weeks. But that is because they had the blood flow in my hands cut completely off, and then they were extremely rough with me. And there was I believe the same officer that handcuffed me, he slams me into the wheelchair, and then he was rolling me around the House or the Senate floor. And there was a lady that tried to get out of the way, and the chair kind of hit it and turned because it's a wheelchair, and she's literally trying to get out of the way. And that same officer said, "What the F?" Of course, he said the whole word right to her, just so ignorant. I was like, "Wow, this officer's terrible." And then they rolled me to the back, and people were filming, and so I said out loud multiple times, "Hey, they've got my hand. The handcuffs are too tight, and they're cutting off my circulation." And the reason I did that is because I felt like that if the officers knew that somebody else knew, that they might adjust the handcuffs.
Accountability.
Right, because I felt like by the time I got to where I was going, which ended up being Ada County Jail, I mean, my hands would be in really bad shape. And so anyway, that's why I said that, and it was very painful, but I've been handcuffed before, and it is painful, especially the way they did it and how tight they did it. I've never been handcuffed that tight, though, to be honest with you. And they didn't double buckle, or they didn't double lock, though. And I did ask them if they would double cuff, but double lock is so that it doesn't continue to tight when they move you around. They didn't do any of that. And anyway, but because I set it on video before they took me into the back rooms and it got it out public, when I got there, one of the officers, not the one pushing me, not the one that put the handcuffs on, but one of the other officers said, "Hey, we better loosen his cuffs." Okay? And so they took me out, threw me on the floor, face down. It was like a tile floor, and they weren't nice about it, but they weren't terrible either. I mean, they could have really hurt me if they would have done it really bad. But they threw me on the floor, and then they loosened the cuffs, and then they double locked them. And it was not the guy that was it was another officer. But the interesting thing is the one that put the handcuffs on me and was pushing me and was so violent. He kept saying, "We need to take him down the tunnel. Let's take him down the tunnel." And he kept pushing, and everybody's like, "No, we'll just take him out the front." He goes, "No, we need to take him down the tunnel." And I thought that was interesting why he was so assertive about going down the tunnel. But anyway, ultimately he convinced them to take him down the tunnel. And so we went down the tunnel, and man, I can't believe how many tunnels there are underneath the Boise.
Capitol Building?
Yeah, in the Capitol Building. I mean, it went clear, not even in the neighborhood, right? And that might be a little bit of exaggeration, but a long ways away. And then we went through these two plastic things, to keep the airflow from going. And it was like we're almost like in a shipping like dock type deal, but underground. And there was a cop car there. And so the guy was pushing me, which was, the one that oh yeah, by the way, when they picked me up off the floor after he handcuffed me, he like grabs me and goes, boom, and slams me into the chair. He's just really violent with me, right? And I'm handcuffed, right? And a couple times on the way, he would like yank me back,
so it hurt.
Yeah, so it hurt my hand, but at least by then my handcuffs were much looser. They were still tight, but much looser than before. Anyway, he rolls me around to the passenger side of the cop car, police car, and that same officer was on the right hand and gets me by the shoulders, and the other one picks me up, and they pick me up, and they put me in the car, and I did like, cause it would be very difficult for them to put me in the car, so I kind of a little bit helped, got in the car. And then the one officer, because now it's tight, right? I'm going into the car. The one officer leaves, and everybody else goes around to this side of the cop car.
So it was just him and you.
Just him and I, and then he kind of pushes me into the car, and then he reaches up and he grabs my neck. So he reaches up and he grabs my neck and he digs his finger into my jugular and just went like really hard and really tight. And he kind of rips his hands like that, and he looks around.
To see if anyone saw.
Yeah, he looked around to see if anybody saw. And no one saw it. But one of the officers that came in from the other door, he was getting ready to put the seat buckle in. And I said, "Did you see that officer just does his fingers and grabbed my jugular and tried to like rip it out of my throat?" And and the officer said, "Who did that?" Like, he was like generally concerned. I goes, "The officer just put me in." And then I never heard nothing else about it. Nothing about it, right? Because he kind of just like, I don't know, just ignored it, right? And he did a really good job, because it is very sore even today.
As if he's probably done it before.
Well,
a couple 100,000 times, maybe.
So that's the point. I cannot imagine this officer being alone with somebody. I mean, this is the type of officer that he will kill somebody, or he will really hurt somebody.
Or he has.
And this is or he already has. And I would bet he has a record of that.
I'm sure.
You know, I would bet the other officers know about that,
Yeah.
right? And this is indicative of the problem that we have with our police forces, is that they're not policing themselves. And I mean, we can go into a lot of detail about that, but you know, I really fear that this officer, if he hasn't already, will kill or hurt somebody really bad, because he was extremely violent, and I cannot imagine being alone with that guy. Now, because of that reason, I did fill out a report. I asked after they got me to the cell, I asked them to take a picture of it, and they did. It took them a little convincing though, because the sheriff's department said, the deputy there said, well, we would have to call ISP so they can investigate it.
Oh.
And I'm like, what? I was like, is that how this goes? Like, I thought you were supposed to check and balance, ISP now is going to investigate their own, and he goes, yeah.
That's it.
But anyway, ultimately what happened is ISP declined. Okay? But they either they or the sheriff's department sent this Sergeant Hill in, and she investigated it, took pictures, and took my report. And I kept telling her, look, it's not about my neck. My neck will it's fine.
Yeah.
Right? It'll heal. It'll take a few days. It'll take a week or so, and the bruises and the stuff will go away. That's not what it's about. It's about what this officer is going to do in the future, right? And identifying him, reprimanding him, and then keeping an eye on him. Imagine this guy being promoted, and now he's over an entire, I don't know what they call it in ISP, whatever, but he's over an entire unit, right? Imagine, then he selects who he wants to be in that unit.
Yeah.
And now you're talking about an entire unit of tyrants that are terrible. And this is what happens. And this is why I felt like it was important, and why I hope that Sergeant Hill does a honest job at trying to identify who he was and identifying the facts, and hopefully getting reprimandation to that officer. Anyhow, so that wasn't the end of it. So I'm in there all day, no lunch, which doesn't hurt me too bad, obviously, but then we get into dinner, and I'm in a holding cell, which is just a complete concrete box, okay, and they've got the cold air blowing in there. I mean, it pretty, a lot of airflow going in, and it is cold air. And but because I just came in from outside, and these rooms I don't think are designed for people to be in very long, it's not that big a deal. There's, they did give me okay, actually I'm getting ahead of myself, because I'm mixing two arrests up. So this, I'm talking about the second time. So it was the same cell. So this was the second time I was in the cell. Anyhow, I've got toilet paper in there. That's about the only thing I got, other than that little toilet with the sink in it, and then the concrete. And they did feed me dinner that night, but then after dinner, I'm in there, and I'm thinking that they're going to either move me, or they're going to give me something, because it's very cold in there, and they've taken my shoes, and all I have this, and I got basically it's pretty thin.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that warm, but they didn't. And so it's starting to get really, really cold. I go to lay on the concrete, and there's nothing other than a roll of toilet paper. And just so you know, I spent 2 years incarcerated, and almost half of that time I spent solitary confinement, and actually 17 days I spent in a holding cell during our trials, where we weren't allowed to change our clothes, to shower, none of that during our trials. So I've spent, days in pretty terrible situations. But what was happening, that happened last night, was that they were not giving me anything to be able to lay on and to keep myself warm. And so it was a constant night of laying, because I was so tired. I'd lay on the concrete using the roll of toilet paper as my pillow, but I would get so cold, my body would get so cold, I'd have to get up, 'cause I couldn't lay there, and I'd have to pace the room until I got warm, and then I'd be so tired from that, I'd lay back down, and I couldn't lay down for more than, on the cold concrete for more than, probably 30 minutes, and I would sleep a little bit, but not much, because I was so tired is the only reason I would sleep a little bit, but that was just ongoing, and it was getting worse and worse throughout the night because my body temperature was dropping. It was that cold that you couldn't maintain, and I could feel myself getting colder and colder and colder. I was trying to breathe into my shirt. I had toilet paper that I was wrapping, I rolled up and was trying to lay on the concrete so that I can, and I've done all these things before, but never for this long amount of time, from, what was it, about, 11:30, noon, and now we're 12 hours into it, and now we're moving on into the morning, so we're, getting, and by the time morning rolled around, and the thing is I wasn't wanting to, be too much of a, a nuisance to them, but I was asking them, hey, could you give me something, anything, even a towel or something, and they would say no, and then one time, and so what they wanted me to do, just so you know, they wanted me to go through a strip search, and then they were going to, put on their uniform and basically put me into what would normally be their solitary confinement. Well, I was not going to go through a strip search. I was not going to go through all of that, and those who know me know why I will not go through a strip search. And so they just kept saying, well, if you're not gonna comply, then you'll just stay in there. But if you want to get a a blanket or anything like that, then you have to do what we tell you to. Well, my friends, this is that very definition of torture, which is, we will relieve your suffering if you do what we tell you to do. And this is not acceptable in our jails. They even went to the point where, and they kept saying that, where, so they have these coverings over the window so you can't see out, but they're just cloth coverings, they're Velcroed. They went to the extent where they opened the window up so I could see out. And this was like probably 3:30, 4 in the morning. I'm extremely cold by this time. And they're watching me. They're watching me get colder and colder. And they're like feeding off it. They're going, if you want to get warm, all you got to do is this. That's what they say. If you want a blanket, all you've got to do is this. And then they opened the window up so I could see. And this is one of the times I was pacing. And they had a big, nice bedroll. And then they had a mattress, and the bedroll had a couple blankets in it, and it looked like, looked like either a thin pad but it was about that big around. And then they had a mattress there. And they said, remember, they opened the window and they said, see, Mr. Bundy, we're going to give this to this guy because he is complying with us. And they showed me how they gave it to that guy, and how he was, and
You're a child.
well, yeah, but they wanted me to look like, I can't imagine how warm and comfortable that blanket at that time would have been, and it would have been.
Which is a breaking process. That's a breaking process. That's what they try to do to these men and women that are, mind you, not convicted.
Yeah.
Not convicted of anything.
Yeah, I've never been even convicted of a misdemeanor. So my entire life. So anyway, but you can, that's what was going on inside the jail. They would not give me, anything to keep warm, and I was freezing. I was, it was, it was becoming an issue, and then I asked when it was probably like, I think it was about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm willing to deal with it. I was going to just push through it, but and my throat was starting to get, I could feel it getting kind of swollen and hurting, which I still don't have my full voice back yet. And I could, and also I will add that this is their COVID unit. So these are where all the COVID people are put. And in fact, that they had a mattress outside my door the entire time where I could see it. And I kept saying, why don't you just give me that mattress? She goes, well, for your units, we don't put mattresses in. And I watched them take the mattress out of the unit right next to me. And so I was like, but I wasn't trying to be a baby or make too big a deal out of it. So I didn't, make too big a deal. But I was getting very cold, and I could see that they had everything that would make it very easy for them to alleviate that, but they wouldn't. So anyway, around 4 or 5 o'clock, I asked the lady, one of the guards, I said, so am I going to be able to see the judge? Remember, my goal now is to see the judge. I want to go in front of her and say, look, I'm asking you as the judicial branch of government of Idaho to check the executive right here and to send a statement. Right? I'm asking you, and I was willing to explain it, why, and why it was important of what was happening. And I was hoping that I'd get a good judge that would see the need to check the governor, to check the ISP, and which is the reason why the judicial branch is there. One of the main reasons, right, is to check the other branches of government, and even check the legislative branch, because the House, the Speaker of the House was also in on this. So it'd be a great opportunity for the judicial branch to check the legislative and the executive branch, especially when they're colluding together. But she said, well, because you're not willing to go through a strip search and get in the jail uniform, we're probably not going to take you back to do the video arraignment, because they're not doing in-person arraignments with the judges because of COVID, right? So I'm seeing what they're doing. They are planning on keeping me there for a long, long time. And I, to be honest with you, I didn't know how many nights I could actually be there.
That cold in those conditions.
And during the day too, because it was never stopped.
Yeah.
And you don't. It's not like the sun made a big difference, because you're inside, concrete walls and all that, and so my body temperature was dropping, and I could feel, like I said, my throat. I could feel my body starting to, not react well. I was getting stiff, and so, I felt like at that point, if I wasn't going to get to see a judge anytime soon, I might as well just bail out and get out of there. I mean, I could have bailed out at any time, but my whole point was I wanted to get in front of that judge, right? I mean, this anti-government guy who participates in all these legislative processes at the Capitol and all that, I really wanted to get in front of a judge so that I could plead my case and hopefully that a Republican form of government with checks and balances would actually start to take effect.
Yeah.
But that wasn't going to happen. I could see that they were just going to make me suffer and more and more and more. And I had suffered enough, and I also was concerned for my wife and children. I thought, you know what, I'm just going to, bail out. And so I did. I used debit card. They had an ATM machine there. They charged $3.75 for each transaction, and then $25 for each charge, plus $600 for bond or for the bail. And I got it all out the day before. When I had someone bailed me out, it cost me $820.
Oh my God.
So anyway, I bailed out, and they gave me my boots back. I put them on, which felt so good because I got my feet warm. Put my jacket back on, which felt good because I was starting to get warmed up, you know. And then they walked me out the hallway and out the building, and it was like I was surprised because it was still a little dark, just a little bit, you know, because I was like, it's hard to know what time it is, you know, and especially when you're hurting that way, you know, to really know, because every minute seems like, you know, a half an hour. Anyway, so then I didn't have my phone, and thinking like a man, I guess, I thought, well, you know, I know my truck's like, I don't know how many miles away. What do you think, like 5 or 6 miles away? I go, it's not really that far away. I'll just walk to my truck. I have the keys in my pocket, and I'll go get my truck and I'll drive home. And I'll say, hey, I'm home, honey. Well, anyhow, so I did that. I walked, you know, it took me quite a while, and I was exhausted. There was a park there. I fell asleep on the car park bench. And then I kept going a little while because I was completely exhausted. And then there was a little area that was landscaped with grass, and it was private. I got in there and fell asleep there because I felt like I needed that to be able to keep going. And then I walked home and almost made it to my truck, and someone recognized me, picked me up, and brought me back to the rest of my truck. And then I found out that my wife was looking for me, and everybody was looking for me, and I apologize for that. I truly do, because I don't know, I guess I was just thinking I'm just going to get my truck and go home. And so anyway, my wife was concerned, and then we kind of got that all together. And so anyway, I just want you to know that that's basically what's happened. Like, you know, I just simply wanted to participate in our Republican form of government process to, you know, bring people to hold accountability to the legislature so they didn't pass another bill that would be detrimental to us. I was hoping that they would pass a resolution to end the order, the emergency order, so that our tyrant of a king government would stop, you know, using his power unjustly. And I mean, I love how, you know, his attorneys say, well, oh, he can have that power indefinitely. I mean, for years, right? And the Constitution of Idaho does not authorize that. The laws do not authorize that. It is a short emergency, 30 to 60 days, and then after that, he has no more power. But the legislatures have lost their way, and so has the governor. And so the people find ourselves trying to answer questions like, whose building is this, the Capitol building? Whose right is it to the freedom of press? You know, do we have a right to be in these buildings? These are the questions that are being asked. And right now, I have 2 trespass charges, 2 resisting of arrest charges, which I find just so amusing because I in no way resisted, and 2 obstruction of justice charges, so 6 charges altogether. And they're really laughable, and I will fight them because I feel very strongly that a jury of the people, right, of the people, will look at it and look at ISP and the governor and, you know, the Speaker of the House and, oh, what's his name again? What?
Higley.
Oh, Higley.
I can remember.
Oh,
his name.
Higley. Okay, sorry. I just keep forgetting that. Anyway, that the jury's going to laugh at them, like, and actually, well, I mean, maybe not laugh, but maybe under their breath they'll laugh and go, "Do you really think that this building belongs to you? And do you really think that people have to get permission to be the press?" These are the questions that are going to be asked and presented to the jury. If the judge will let us go to a jury, right, which is a huge corruption,
Yep.
and if the judge and the government will let the truth get to the jury, because that's what happens a lot. So there it is in a nutshell. Sorry it was so long. You know, I thought about going back to the Capitol building for one more round, but my wife keeps telling me not to. Because the reason why I keep saying that, you know, one is I am a little stubborn, but 2 is that that's our house.
Yeah.
And if they want it to be their house, this is how I look at it. If they want it to be their house, then they can pay for it. Idaho State Police can dig in their blue pockets, and they can pay for it,
Instead
right?
of the people.
Instead of the people.
Yep.
So you want it to be your house, Mr. Higley, then get deep down in your pocket. Go to your little safe where you keep your guns and stuff and get your cash out. Because this house belongs to the people and we paid for it from the beginning till now. And to be honest with you, you're our servant. You belong to us when you're on the clock because we pay your bills. And if you don't like that, then you can pay for it yourself. And the people will just reserve ourselves and we'll start to have our own society, our own social compacts, because that's the only choice you're giving us. And it just reminds me again, and I've said this many times, John F. Kennedy's quote, "Those who make peaceful revolutions impossible make violent revolutions inevitable." And I'll leave you with those thoughts. Thank you.